In my past life, my roommate Trixie was planning to go back to her boyfriend's hometown to get married, hoping it would bring good fortune to his family. I pleaded with her from the bottom of my heart not to go. She was convinced by my advice and stayed. Later, her boyfriend went back home and married his middle school classmate instead. The attempt to ward off bad luck with a wedding failed, and his mother still passed away. Yet, that newlywed couple was living the high life, driving luxury cars, and living in a mansion. When Trixie found out, she stormed into the dorm like a madwoman and started yelling at me. She said if I hadn't stopped her back then, she'd be the one living in a mansion and driving a luxury car. Now, before I could say a word, she pushed me off the 6th floor. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day when she asked me with teary eyes if I wanted to go in this life. I will no longer make decisions for her. 1. Sarah, tell me, should I really go back to his hometown with him or not? The familiar voice hit my ears and my whole body went rigid as my eyes snapped open. The harsh glare from the fluorescent light on the dorm ceiling made my eyes ache. Half-dried laundry hung on the balcony, and last night's takeout containers were still piled on the desk across from me. Trixie sat on her bed, clutching her phone. Her eyes rimmed red as she gazed at me with a pitiful, pleading look. That very face, in my past life, she had looked at me with those same red-rimmed eyes, weeping as if she had suffered some grievous injustice. Yet later, it was the same face that contorted into a ghastly, monstrous visage as I lay, dying. I remember her gripping my collar tightly, her eyes bloodshot, her voice piercingly shrill. Sarah, if you hadn't stopped me back then, I'd be living in a mansion and driving a luxury car by now. It's all your fault. In the next moment, she pushed me off the rooftop. The howling wind filled my ears as my body plummeted, the excruciating pain of shattered bones searing into my soul. Even now, chills still run up and down my spine. I pinched myself hard, barely managing to suppress the icy grip of impending death. Seeing that I remained silent, Trixie's tears began to fall again. Sarah, you've got to help me figure this out. I'm a complete mess. Right now, the other 2 girls in the dorm were startled by the commotion. Tiffany put down her nail polish, and Jade took off one side of her headphones, both turning to look this way. If this were before, I would have spoken up by now. Out of the 4 of us in the dorm, I've always been the one with the most ideas. If someone had a fight with their boyfriend, they'd come to me. If someone didn't know how to ask their advisor for leave, they'd come to me. If someone wanted to switch part-time jobs but was afraid of getting scammed, they'd come to me. Even deciding where to eat for dorm gatherings always fell on me. And Trixie, she always came to ask me. She came from a poor background, standing at the door with a plastic bag in her arms when she first moved into the dorm, her smile tinged with shyness. Later, as we got to know her, we learned that her parents favored her brother, gave her little allowance, and often asked her to buy things for him. I felt sorry for her and often helped her. She couldn't bear to eat vegetables and always dipped her buns in soup, so I would get an extra meat dish, claiming I couldn't finish it and share it with her. When she suffered from severe menstrual cramps to the point of turning pale yet couldn't afford painkillers, I pretended to have bought too much and handed her brown sugar water and heat patches. She wanted to get a part-time job, but even hesitated over bus fare, so I asked a friend to introduce her to a milk tea shop and a mall promotion near the school, and even covered the uniform. Deposit for her whenever she was short on cash. She'd come to me for a loan. Tissues, shampoo, face wash, sheet, masks, skin care products. She's helped herself to almost every personal item of mine in the dorm, and I never made a fuss about it. Over time, she got used to it. I was so used to picking up the phone the moment she started speaking at that thought. I looked up at her, my voice flat. Why are you asking me about something like that? Trixie was visibly taken aback. I'm just not sure, and I'd like to hear your opinion, but I don't understand this either. I looked at her. Marriage is such a big decision. You should have discussed it with your family first. What did they say? Her expression stiffened slightly as she spoke in a soft voice. I haven't told them yet. Then ask them right away, I said in a neutral tone. This isn't the kind of thing an outsider can decide for you anyway. What were you planning to make this decision on your own in secret? Trixie bit her lip, her eyes growing even redder. But if I ask, they definitely won't agree. Then it's all the more reason to be upfront about it. I said flatly. Just don't ask me. I've never been through this, and I wouldn't dare give you bad advice. This is a decision for a lifetime. If I say the wrong thing, I couldn't bear the responsibility. The dorm room fell silent for 2 seconds. Tiffany gave me a look of surprise. After all, the old me loved nothing more than analyzing the pros and cons for people. Trixie was stunned, too, as if she never expected me to wash my hands of the matter so completely. I'm not asking you to take responsibility. Her voice softened further. I just think you're more decisive than I am, and you can see things more clearly from the sidelines. That doesn't help. I leaned back against the headboard. It's not my life to live. What could I possibly see clearly if I said to go? It wouldn't be appropriate. It's not right for me to say no either. So, don't ask me. Her face gradually turned pale as if unwilling to give up. She turned to look at Tiffany again. Tiffany, so what do you think? I don't. Ask her. I cut indirectly. The dorm room fell silent. Trixie whipped her head around. What do you mean? I looked at her, my tone still flat. It means this isn't something anyone should ask about. Marriage is for life. No one can make that decision for you. If you're really unsure, tuck it over with your family first. That's a decision that will affect the rest of your life. As the last sentence was spoken, Tiffany's mouth, which had already opened, closed again. Jade also took off her headphones completely, frowned, looked at Trixie, and then at me. Trixie stood frozen in place, her eyes welling up and turning red. Her tears always came easily. Sure enough, a tear plopped on the very next second. Sarah, why are you being so harsh today? In my past life, I probably would have started wondering if I'd been too harsh. But now, all I feel is bitter amusement. All I did was refuse to take the blame she was trying to pass to me. I wasn't being harsh, I said flatly. I merely stated that I don't understand, and I don't dare to advise. Trixie bit her lip, remaining silent for a long time, then retreated to her bed with her phone, pulled the curtain shut, and stayed quiet. The dormitory was silent for a few minutes. Tiffany couldn't hold back first, whispering to me, "What's wrong with you today?" She was almost crying, and you didn't say a word to comfort her. I unscrewed my water bottle and took a sip, then asked her, "Back Why didn't you try to persuade her? Tiffany choked. How could I dare? Well, there you go. I put the bottle back on the table. Marriage is such a big deal. And she didn't ask her parents, but came to ask her roommate. Don't you find that strange? Tiffany paused for a moment. My tone was calm. Who would dare to advise on such a matter? If she makes a decision based on someone else's words and it doesn't work out, are you going to take responsibility for her? Tiffany fell silent instantly, and Jade leaned back in her chair and for once spoke up for me. Sarah's right. This kind of thing should be discussed with the family first. I didn't respond, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Trixie wasn't going to give up that easily. You too. Sure enough, just after 11 p.m. that night, right after I'd stepped out of the shower, my phone buzzed a few times. Trixie texted me on WeChat. Sarah, do you think I'm being really stupid? I'm not asking you to decide for me. I just want to hear what you think. You're so smart. You must see things more clearly than I do. I looked at those few lines and remembered how in my previous life she had done the same, repeatedly, questioning me, determined to extract a definitive answer from me. I replied to her, I really don't understand this kind of thing. You should discuss it with your family first. Marriage is a lifelong commitment. I dare not speak carelessly. After sending, I casually took a screenshot and saved it. The next morning, Trixie stood on the balcony, talking on the phone with her boyfriend. At first, she kept her voice down, but as they got to the main point, her tone slipped out. What's really going on with your mom now? So, what does your family think? That's not what I meant. I just want to know if we really go back. Will it be? She trailed off when she suddenly noticed all of us looking at her and immediately stopped talking. I bent down to pack my bag, fully aware of what was going on. It's not that she didn't want to go. On the contrary, her heart had already leaned in that direction. Trixie came from a modest background, and her gentle nature meant she had always lacked someone firmly on her side. The guy had been nice to her, sweet-talked her, and his family was better off than Trixie's. For Trixie, this wasn't just an ordinary relationship. It was a tangible path she could see and feel. So, she couldn't bear to let go. She couldn't bear to let go of the relationship, nor could she give up on this future that didn't seem so bad. Yet, even so, she still didn't dare to shoulder the consequences herself. That's why she was desperate to hear a word of assurance from someone else. Jade, still groggy from just waking up, asked offhandedly, Have you talked to your family yet? Trixie's face palled, and she whispered, Not yet. I slung my bag over my shoulder and said, Then you should sort this out with your family first. She looked up at me, her eyes already filled with resentment. I pretended not to see it and turned to leave the room. When I returned to the dorm at noon, Trixie was sitting on her bed as if she had been waiting for me. As soon as I walked in, she asked in a low voice, Sarah, have you been to the cafeteria yet? Could you grab me a meal while you're there? I don't have much of an appetite today and don't feel like going down. I placed the book on the table. Can't. She was stunned. Huh. I have something else to do later. I'm actually fine. I just don't want to do those little things for her anymore that she's grown so accustomed to. Trixie obviously noticed, and her expression faltered for a moment. Well, forget it. I'll go myself. After she left, Tiffany whispered to me, Did you two really Have a falling out? No, I said, indifferently. I just suddenly felt that there are some things that don't need to be helped all the time. Tiffany frowned. Isn't she going through a tough time right now? Do you really have to draw a line with her now? I looked up at her and smiled. So, not bringing her lunch means I'm drawing a line. Tiffany was momentarily speechless. I couldn't be bothered to explain some. Kindness, if given for too long, becomes taken for granted once you take it back. It feels like you've done something wrong. But why should it? Over the next few days, I began to gradually take back the conveniences I had previously given to Trixie. She borrowed my curling iron, and I said I needed it. She asked if I had extra face masks, and I said no. She wanted to borrow my white dress for a date, and I simply replied, not convenient. The most obvious one is borrowing money on Thursday night. She stood by my desk for a long time before finally speaking in a small voice. Her eyes read, Sarah, do you have some cash on hand? I was wondering if I could borrow $500 from you. I was doing my homework, not even looking up. You still haven't paid back the $800 you borrowed from me last time. Her face instantly went pale. I know. It's just that these past couple of days, when you're in a better spot financially, pay back the last loan, along with this one. I looked up at her. I won't be lending you anything this time. Trixie stood rooted to the spot, and tears immediately began to fall. Do you have to be like this? I closed my pen and looked up at her like, what? You weren't like this before, she said with a trembling voice. Sarah, if I did something wrong, you can just tell me. The way you're acting now, it really hurts me with just that one sentence. She made it seem like I was the one deliberately tormenting her. Looking at her, I suddenly felt the urge to laugh. In my past life, she was a master of this very tactic, too. She was clearly the one trying to take advantage. Yet, somehow I always ended up being the one left embarrassed. That was then, I said, flatly. Just because I was willing to help before doesn't mean I'm obligated to keep helping now. And another thing, a loan is a loan. Money owed should be paid back. Trixie's tears fell even harder. Her lips pressed tightly together, looking utterly wrong. Just then, someone from the next dorm came over. The moment they stepped in and saw her crying, they immediately frowned and looked at me. What's going on here? Trixie shook her head and said with a stuffy nose, It's fine. It's my own fault. The moment those words were spoken, the atmosphere shifted. The visiting girl's lip towards me instantly changed. Sarah, come on. Don't be like that. We're all in the same dorm, and you know her family situation. I leaned back in my chair and cut her off. You know she's owed me that $800 for a year now. Trixie's face instantly went pale. I'll pay it back. Then do it. I looked at her. What's with the tears? The room fell into a heavy, profound silence. The girl opened her mouth, but no words came out for a long moment. Trixie's tears fell even harder, yet she couldn't manage a single word in reply. After the others had left, Tiffany closed the door and asked me in a low voice, Are you really not going to care about her at all now? I screwed the hand cream cap back on, my tone indifferent. It's not that I don't want to care, it's that I dare not. Tiffany frowned. Borrowing money and whether she gets married are two different things. They're two different things, I said, looking at her. But it just hit me. There are a lot of things I was never meant to carry on my own. Money is like that. Possessions are like that. And the big things in life, especially. Tiffany was silent for a few seconds, as if she understood, yet not completely. I didn't plan on explaining any further. After all, some lessons can't truly be learned until you've been bitten back. 3. 2 days later, Trixie's boyfriend, Kevin, actually called me directly, standing in the shade outside the teaching building. I answered that unfamiliar local call. The tone on the other end of the phone was polite yet urgent. Hello, is this Sarah? I'm Kevin, Trixie's boyfriend. I gave a simple H. The thing is, Trixie is really torn. Right now, I know she listens to you the most. Could you help me persuade her? My mom's situation at home is really. You've got the wrong person. I cut him off directly. There was an obvious pause. On the other end, what? I can't advise on this. My tone was indifferent. This is a major life decision for her. She should ask her family, not me. He was getting anxious, but she'll only listen to you right now. That's none of my business, I said flatly. I don't understand it, and I wouldn't dare give advice. It's between the two of you. Sort it out yourselves. With that, I hung up the phone. When I got back to the dorm that evening, Trixie was already sitting on her bed waiting for me. Her eyes were red again, and the moment she saw me, she asked, "Why did you talk to Kevin like that?" I put my bag on the table and looked up at her. How did I talk to him? He just wanted you to help talk some sense into me, she said, biting her lip. Was it really necessary to be so cold? As for that, I looked at her. It's because I could never have talked you out of it in the first place. Trixie froze. My tone wasn't harsh, but every word was spoken with deliberate clarity. How many times do I have to say it? I haven't been through this. I don't understand. Marriage is a huge decision. You should have talked it over with your family first, not come to me. And your boyfriend had even less business coming to me. I'm not your family, and I'm not a party to your relationship. Why on earth should I be the one making decisions for you two? My words left her pale and speechless. Several seconds passed before she managed to force out a sentence. I never said you had to be responsible for it. Just because you didn't say it out loud doesn't mean you won't resent me later. I looked at her. So I'm making myself clear now. I don't understand. I'm not sure. So I won't give advice. It was the first time in my life I had ever been so brutally honest. Trixie stared at me, the fragile sheen of tears in her eyes finally giving way, revealing a faint glimmer of resentment. She probably realized it, too. This time, I wouldn't indulge her, placate her, or shoulder her burdens like I used to. She fell silent. On the weekend, Trixie finally called home. I didn't hear it. She mentioned it herself in the dorm group chat that evening. My parents don't agree. A few minutes later, she added another message. They just don't understand me at all. Tiffany looked at the group messages inside. Her family definitely wouldn't allow it. Jade didn't even look up. That's normal. Who would agree to let a college student who hasn't even graduated drop out of school to get married, especially for something like a propitiatory wedding? Trixie didn't reply, but I knew deep down she already had her answer. It wasn't that she hadn't made up her mind. She just didn't want to bear the weight of that decision alone. 3 more days passed, and Trixie took a leave of absence. She stood at the dormitory door with her suitcase, which I had given her. Her eyes were red and swollen, indicating she had cried a lot these past few days. But I knew too well that if she had already packed her suitcase, it meant she had made up her mind long ago. She stood by my bait, as if still unwilling, wanting to hear one last word from me. Sarah, I've decided to go back with Kevin. I looked down at my phone and responded with a simple She gripped the handle of her suitcase, paused for a few seconds, and then asked, "Don't you have anything to say to me?" It was then that I looked up at her. Yes, her eyes lit up. I looked at her, my tone calm. "Call your parents first to let them know you've arrived safely. If possible, discuss it with them again. Don't make decisions about this on your own without talking to anyone. Think it through carefully yourself." Trixie's expression gradually froze. Perhaps this was never what she wanted to hear. Finally, she bit her lip and left with her suitcase. The dorm was eerily quiet the moment the door closed. I looked at her empty bed and slowly let out a sip. After Trixie left, the dormitory fell into a sudden, profound quiet. But even though she was gone, her messages seemed to have a life of their own, finding their way into our phones every few days. At first, she was still putting on a show of prosperity in the dorm group chat. First, she posted a photo of a table laden with dishes: chicken soup, steamed fish, braised pork belly. The table was packed. Each dish got a close-up shot, as if she was afraid people might miss them. Annie is in much better spirits today. 2 days later, another selfie. She wore a gold necklace around her neck, intentionally zooming the camera in close. It was something his family insisted on giving later. There was a photo of her standing at the gate of the courtyard. She wore a red dress, her face powdered, her lips painted bright, with Kevin standing beside her, a large red character pasted on the door. "It will all get better slowly." Tiffany stared at her phone for a long time, then couldn't help but click her tongue. "She doesn't look like she's going to bring good luck. She looks like she's going to show off her turnover." Jade sneered. "The more she posts like this, the more it shows she's insecure. Indeed, she's the type who, if she's truly doing well, would rather keep it to herself. Only those who lack confidence would desperately try to show off, almost as if they want to prove, with every meal, every piece of jewelry, and every polite remark that they made the right choice." Sure enough, not long after she stopped posting those peaceful life photos in the group, changed to private chat with me first. She complained about how difficult her mother-in-law is to deal with. She said that the woman who only regained her breath thanks to her blessing didn't treat her as a savior, but rather as a free maid. She complained about her cooking being too salty, the oil being too much, her laundry being slow, her inability to read the room, and even made sarcastic remarks like, "Young people are so spoiled." When she sat for a while, then she started complaining about Kevin again. She said Kevin wasn't as protective of her as he used to be when he was pursuing her. Every time she had a conflict with her mother-in-law, Kevin would either pretend not to hear or ignore it. If she said a few more words, he would frown and say, "I'm stuck in the middle and it's exhausting. Can't you be more understanding?" She sent me a long message and finally asked Sarah, "What should I do now?" Shortly after, she sent another message, "But I've come this far." I stared at that line for a long time, but in the end, I didn't reply. The path was her own choice. She jumped into the pit herself. She got to where she is today, step by step, not pushed by others. For the next month or so, Trixie just lingered. She was unwilling to leave, yet couldn't live. Well, when it came down to it, she just couldn't bring herself to leave. For one thing, she still had feelings for Kevin. For another, no matter how chaotic Kevin's family was, it was still a far cry better than the home she came from. At least there she had enough to eat, decent clothes to wear, and the prospect of a better life, the promise of having married up to keep her going. She kept telling herself that if she could just endure a little longer, grit her teeth through a bit more, things would eventually work themselves out. Unfortunately, she didn't wait for none, but instead received a greater retribution. At first, it was just Kevin, who couldn't put his phone down. He checked it while eating, walking, and even took it to the bathroom. Later on, he even brought it into the shower. The chat history was being deleted more and more frequently, and the trips out of the house were becoming increasingly common. At first, Trixie was just fooling herself. She told me it was probably just family stress. Kevin was upset and needed to get some air, which was perfectly normal. But even as she said it, she didn't believe a word of it. One night, she sneaked to peek at Kevin's phone while he was asleep. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she called me a dozen times in a row. I woke up to my phone vibrating, its screen flickering. In the dark, the caller ID displayed two words, Trixie. I picked up, and before I could say a word, I heard her gasping for breath on the other end. Sarah, Kevin cheated on me. I was too lazy to listen closely. Just as she was crying and cursing, a name suddenly slipped out of her mouth. That Vivian. My grip on the phone tightened abruptly. Bevan. That name. I know it all too well. In my past life, just before Trixie pushed me down the stairs, she kept muttering that name over and over. She said it was because I stopped her that Vivian was able to swoop in and take advantage. She claimed that after Vivian married into that family, she lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, and stole the life that was rightfully hers. I was silent for a couple of seconds, my voice flat. Who are you talking about, Vivian? Trixie's voice cracked with emotion. Kevin's middle school classmate. They were always flirty back then. I can't believe it. After all these years, she's still haunting him. I leaned back against the headboard, suddenly wide awake after all this time. It's still her. Trixie is still falling apart over there. She says she hasn't caught them in the act yet, but the messages on her phone are already driving her crazy. Good morning, good night, delivering medicine and fruit. Remember to add clothes when it gets colder, and I'll bring you porridge if your stomach hurts. Tomorrow, on the surface, they claim it's just old classmates catching up, but the hidden flirtatiousness in their words is unmistakable. It's obvious to anyone with half a brain that they've crossed the line long ago. What drove Trixie crazy was how perfect Vivian's life seemed. She lived in a prestigious, upscale community, and her social media was filled with photos of afternoon tea or beach vacations rotating through designer bags, jewelry, and luxury shoes, with a car that wasn't cheap either. A woman who seemed to have everything. Yet, she still had her eyes on the man Trixie had finally managed to get. Trixie's voice trembled with growing hatred as she spoke. She's already so rich. Why does she have to take my husband? She has everything. Why does she have to covet my things? The next morning, Trixie sent me dozens of messages again. One moment, she was calling Vivian a home wrecker. The next, she was cursing Kevin for being a heartless bastard. Then, Through tears, she'd ask herself what she lacked that Vivian had. This went on until noon when she finally said, "I'm going to find her." I stared at those words and eventually replied, "Calm down. Don't go yet. This is the first time I've stopped her head on since my rebirth. Not to save her. I know too well that someone like her, who's at the end of their rope, can go crazy and bring misfortune to anyone involved. Unfortunately, I still underestimated her. Not only did she go, but she also made things even uglier than in her previous life. 5. I didn't have the full picture of what happened next. Not at first. Some details came from Trixie, sobbing over the phone. Others were picked up by Tiffany and the girls from various sources. Bit by bit, the whole story finally came together that day. Trixie had gone to plead with Vivian. She went out of her way to change into a dress, put on makeup, and even bought some fruit. It was as if she wanted to present herself with a bit of dignity, to at least not lose face too badly. She said that at first she genuinely intended to swallow her pride and beg her way through this. She arrived at Vivian's apartment complex and waited downstairs for a long time. Finally, Vivian descended in her high heels, dressed in designer clothes, carrying a handbag, every hair on her head exuding an air of meticulous refinement. When Trixie finally spoke, her tone was still soft and placating. She said, "Miss Bevan, I beg you, with your conditions, what kind of man can't you find? Can you please stop contacting Kevin?" Bevan stood on the steps, looking down at her, as if she were a joke. She didn't take the fruit, nor did she respond. She just curled her lips. "You're begging me." Trixie said that her face immediately flushed, but she endured it. She continued, "You have money, a house, a car. You lack for nothing. But all I have left is Kevin. Please just let us go." Vivian let out a laugh. "Right then and there. Let you go," she repeated, slowly, her gaze sweeping over Trixie's entire body as lightly and as sharply as a blade. "You've got it all wrong. I never stole anything from you. If a man chooses to be with someone, shouldn't you be asking him why?" That remark was a slap in the face all on its own. Just then, Kevin arrived. Trixie had hoped he would side with her, but Kevin came over, grabbed her arm without even asking, and his face looked like he was about to explode. "Are you crazy? Who told you to come here?" Trixie was stunned on the spot. "Who do you think I'm here for?" "Kevin, can't you see she's hitting on you?" Kevin completely ignored her question, gritting his teeth as he hissed under his breath, "Could you stop making a scene? Making a scene?" Those words felt like a public slap across Trixie's face. She had already ground her pride into the dirt by coming to beg for help. Yet the man she pleaded with not only failed to protect her, but stood before another woman and called her an embarrassment. Vivian stood to the side, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with barely concealed mockery in her eyes. Trixie just saw red. She said later that her mind went completely blank with a loud buzz and all reason deserted her. She first slammed the fruit in her hand onto the ground and apples rolled everywhere. Then she lunged forward and yanked Vivian's hair. Her curse is growing increasingly vulgar. "Aren't you so capable? Aren't you so high and mighty? You're trying to steal someone else's man, and you still have the nerve to act decent." The scene instantly descended into chaos. Kevin tried to pull her away, but Trixie lashed out with her nails. Vivian wasn't one to back down either. She raised her hand and slapped Trixie. Two women were entangled at the edge of the steps, their hair disheveled, skirts askew, and faces contorted with rage. In the midst of the struggle, Vivian's foot slipped, and she tumbled down the steps. The moment she hit the ground, her face turned pale and blood soon appeared. Between her legs, the scene fell silent for a brief moment. In the next moment, Trixie was also stunned. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to. Unfortunately, no one believed this. Vivian is pregnant. The child was gone on the spot. Trixie later cried uncontrollably on the phone, saying she only pushed once and had no idea Vivian was pregnant. But no matter how pitiful she sounded, the situation had already spiraled out of control. The best is yet to come after her miscarriage. Vivian had just woken up and was completely falling apart emotionally, presumably thinking she was alone in the hospital room. She grabbed her phone and started making a tearful call, her voice sharp and frantic, holding nothing back. As fate would have it, every word was heard loud and clear by Trixie, who is eavesdropping from just outside the door. I've lost the baby, and you still won't come to see me. Didn't you promise you'd give me an explanation? La Sue, what am I supposed to do now? When Trixie called me later, there was even an excitement in her voice she couldn't contain. Sarah, guess what? That Vivian is finally getting what she deserves. It turns out that phone call wasn't answered by Mr. Sue himself at all. It was Mr. Sue's wife. Apparently, Mrs. Sue had her suspicions all along, but in the past, Mr. Sue had always covered for Vivian, claiming she was his secretary, a distant relative, or just someone he was helping out. Without solid proof, Mrs. Sue had to let a lot of things slide. This time the evidence came to us on the other end of the line. Vivian didn't know who she was talking to, sobbing uncontrollably, repeating, "Our child is gone, and when will you come to be with me?" Until a cold voice asked, "Vivian, whose child are you saying is gone? Who are you calling now?" They say, in that instant, the hospital room fell so silent you could have heard a pin drop. Vivian froze on the spot. The color drained from her face in an instant, and she nearly dropped her phone. But before she could smooth things over, the person on the other end of the line completely lost it. Mrs. Sue began lashing out, one cutting remark after another. "I really underestimated you. You put on such an innocent act in public, but behind the scenes, you're quite skilled at cozying up to the boss. You're already pregnant. How long do you plan to keep up this act?" It said that quite a crowd had gathered outside the hospital room that day. The nurses, family members, and passers-by who stopped to gawk. Everyone got the gist of it. The veneer of dignity Vivian always maintained was stripped away from her right then and there. She had planned to use the baby in her womb to force her way to the top, but the baby was lost. The relationship was exposed on the spot and her reputation was shattered. 6. It was only when I heard this that I finally began to piece together the inconsistencies from my previous life. In my previous life, Trixie didn't get married. Later, she only heard that Kevin turned around and married Vivian, living in a luxurious mansion and driving a luxury car, enjoying a very glamorous life. That's exactly why she blamed all her resentment on me, convinced that I had held her back and caused her to miss the wealth and fortune that should have been hers. But looking back now, those mansions and Luxury cars might not have been legitimate from the very beginning. If I'm not mistaken, in the previous life, Mrs. Sue only had suspicions but never caught solid evidence. So the matter was never fully exposed. Vivian eventually got married, and while the wedding looked picture perfect on the surface, it conveniently swept all that messy business under the rug. This time around, the scandal broke early, and when it did, it was brutal, sordid, and utterly humiliating. Word has it that Mr. Sue built his entire fortune on the back of his wife's family connections. A single outburst from Mrs. Sue is enough to turn his world upside down. Not long after they divorced, all the connections in the company, project resources, and the assets that gave him clout were reclaimed by Mrs. Sue. The house wasn't Vivian's, the car wasn't Vivian's, and even her former high and mighty facade was nothing more than a shadow stolen from someone else's money and connections. Now that layer of skin has been stripped away. She is nothing. When Trixie later sent me a voice message, her tone was full of gloating satisfaction. Vivian has lost everything. Now, the house is gone, the car is gone, and the children are gone, too. Boss Sue is practically a stray dog himself now. When would he have time to look after her? And Kevin, he's as meek as a lamb these days. Wouldn't dare give me any more trouble. She said all this with a hint of smugness in her tone, as if with Vivian down and Kevin cowed, she had become the ultimate victor. She was too early to celebrate because the retribution is just beginning. Mr. Sue didn't dare to continue his feud with his ex-wife, nor did he want the scandal to become public and ruin his reputation. So he simply took out all his anger on others. The child is gone, and it's Trixie's fault. The whole thing blew up because of Kevin. Vivian's downfall was also caused by those two. Anyone else was more to blame than he was. Before long, people from his side showed up, using the killed the child accusation as their pretext. Trixie is really panicking this time when she messaged me. Her typing was all over the place. They all blaming me now. Kevin's family blames me, and so does Boss Sue Sarah. I really didn't expect it to turn out like this. I looked at those few lines and couldn't help but laugh. Every time she pushed her luck, she always thought she was just standing her ground. When the trouble finally hit, she would always act like she never saw it coming. A few families quickly got into a fierce fight. Kevin's family initially wanted to keep the matter under wraps, but the people from Boss Suicide were not interested in reasoning, blocking the door, slamming the table, and constantly demanding compensation, human lives, and explanations. Trixie was caught in the middle and was scolded mercilessly. Kevin blamed her for being brainless and causing a scene. Kevin's dad blamed her for being a jinx, saying she had turned the house upside down shortly after arriving, and the mother-in-law she had desperately tried to bring good luck to finally showed her true colors this time. She pointed her finger at Trixie's nose, cursing her for being stubborn, unlucky, and a source of trouble. If it weren't for you, this troublemaker, coming into our home, would our family have ended up like this? I must have been blind to have brought you back in the first place. Driven mad by the insults, Trixie shrieked back in retaliation. Inside, the shouting match was a complete chaos, while outside, someone was pounding on the door. Kevin's mom was already in poor health, and this emotional outburst made her so angry that her face turned pale and her chest heaved violently. But no one in The room paid any attention to her until, in the midst of the pushing and chaos, she lost her balance and collapsed. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, it was already too late. At this point, I felt a momentary disorientation. In my previous life, Kevin's mother also passed away back then. Everyone said it was because the illness couldn't be endured and the propitious event didn't work. But as I've come this far in this life, I've become increasingly suspicious. Her death in her previous life might not have been due to illness. After all, after that, things spiraled completely out of control. On one side, there was a miscarriage. On the other, a death and affair was exposed, while several families scrambled to pin the blame on each other. Everyone had dirty hands, and everyone was afraid of getting dragged down themselves. So, they only made the whole mess uglier, nastier, and more impossible to clean up. There were a lot of rumors flying around about how it was actually handled, but I never looked into them closely. All I know is Kevin did a complete about face and became dead set on divorcing Trixie. Trixie, of course, refused, but her refusal was pointless. Kevin's last shred of patience for her had long been worn away by all the petty drama. He even berated her in front of others. What else can you do besides cause trouble? The biggest regret of my life is ever getting involved with you. Those words hit Trixie harder than a slap across the face because what she got in return for betting everything was a single sentence. My biggest regret is ever getting involved with you. It was almost laughable that Trixie thought of her parents right at that moment. Yes, even her parents, who had always favored sons over daughters, had rushed to be there. Of course, they weren't here to back her up. They came to settle accounts. They rushed to Kevin's house, wailing and lamenting, claiming their daughter's life was ruined and constantly demanding compensation. After a few rounds of commotion, they actually managed to squeeze some money out of Kevin's family. The moment the money was in their hands, their expressions visibly brightened. Yet, they still weren't satisfied because their daughter, that pawn of theirs, was practically useless. Now, she could have earned money after graduating, but now she dropped out. Her reputation was ruined. Her marriage was on the rocks, and they could see even the last bit of value was about to be squeezed dry. So, they turned around and took their grievances straight to the school. They accused the school of being irresponsible, the counselor of neglecting the students, and questioned how the institution could just stand by and watch a girl drop out to get married before even graduating. It was only then that we found out Trixie had secretly withdrawn from school a while ago. The dormitory erupted into chaos. Tiffany stared at her phone, stunned for a long moment. When did she drop out? How come we didn't hear a single thing about it? Jade sneered. What else? She was afraid people would stop her, afraid they'd find out she's throwing her education away just to get married. To be honest, I'm not surprised at all. 7. After the whole mess reached the school, Trixie came back with her parents. That day, she stood outside the counselor's office, her eyes red and swollen from crying, looking utterly disheveled. But the moment she saw me, her eyes lit up. It wasn't the look you give a friend. That was the look of someone seeing a scapegoat. She rushed over to me in a few steps, her tears falling on cue, her voice soft and hoarse, putting on an act as if she had suffered a grave injustice. Sarah, I know you don't want to talk to me right now, but you can't just deny it. If it weren't for you constantly giving me advice, how would I have ended up like this? The office suddenly fell silent. Tiffany exploded. On the spot. What are you talking about? Trixie cried even harder. I'm not talking nonsense. She clearly knew I was confused at that time. Clearly knew Kevin's family situation was complicated. If she had stopped me a few more times, I wouldn't have. That's enough. I cut her off. Directly, I unlocked my phone, retrieved the screenshots I had saved earlier, and placed them one by one on the table. The first one was the reply I sent her when she first asked me, "Getting married is a huge decision. You should talk to your parents first." The second one was my reply when she pressed me for an answer. "I don't understand these things and I wouldn't dare give advice." The third one was the last thing I said to her before she left. "Think it through for yourself and remember to talk to your parents about it." I slid the phone toward her. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, enough for everyone in the office to hear. "Tell me which part of what I said sounded like I was giving you advice. Did I tell you to go, or did I tell you to marry him? I've been telling you from the start to talk it over with your family and think it through for yourself. And now you've made a mess of your own life and you come here to blame me." She opened her mouth, ready to sow out some excuse, Jade cutting coldly. "Our whole dorm can vouch for this. She never made a single decision for you. You're the one who went around the whole building asking everyone for advice and then gave them the cold shoulder if they didn't tell you what you wanted to hear." Tiffany chimed in. "So, you weren't really here for advice back then. You just wanted someone to make the decision for you and take the blame if things went wrong." Good thing Sarah was sharp. A few classmates nearby nodded in agreement. Someone recalled Trixie asking for opinions everywhere during that time. Someone said she was already dead, set on getting married, and no one could tuck her out of it. Someone else muttered softly, "Isn't she just reaping what she sowed?" With each remark, Trixie's already pale face turned even whiter. The counselor's expression darkened after hearing the story. She looked at Trixie, her tone both disappointed and cold. "You chose to drop out. You chose to get married. And now that things have gone wrong, you blame your classmates. This is not the place for you to act up. No one else is obligated to take responsibility for your life." Trixie's mom was about to throw a tantrum, but when the evidence was laid out clearly, her arrogance immediately deflated. Trixie's dad looked utterly embarrassed, as if he couldn't bear the shame, and yanked her hard by the arm. "Haven't you embarrassed herself enough?" The sudden yank sent Trixie stumbling forward, and her tears began to fall in earnest. But this time, no one was buying her act. She stood, rooted to the spot, her face flushing and paling by turns. Her lips trembled for a long moment, but in the end, she couldn't muster a single coherent word. In the end, her parents came and took her away. I heard Kevin cut all ties with her for good. Vivian's a wreck. Kevin's a mess. Boss Sue crashed and burned. And Trixie, who thought she could climb over others to get ahead, ended up with nothing, completely shattering her own life instead. After she went back to her hometown, her reputation was completely ruined. She had dropped out of school, caused trouble, almost got involved in a murder, and was kicked out by her in-laws. All these rumors spread like wildfire. Her parents found her unlucky and a financial burden, and eventually, they couldn't even be bothered to pretend anymore. They just wanted to sell her off again for a decent bride price. It's said that in the end they really married her off to an older man. The conditions were bad and his temper was worse. But Trixie no longer had the luxury of choice. In my past life, she killed me. In this life, I did nothing, just stood still and watched, watching her step by step, pushing herself into the abyss with her own hands. Story 2. The moment my brother Cashin was born, my mother dug a claw hammer out of her toolbox. She'd felt a slight protrusion on his ear, what folks call a rebellious bone, said to foretell a defiant nature. She insisted, if we don't smash this bone flat, he'll grow up trouble. An ungrateful wretch will never learn loyalty. This hammer strike will change his fate, make him obedient, successful, spare us all future grief. I threw myself in front of that hammer with everything I had, saving his ear from being torn off. But later he squandered his life on drinking, gambling, and women, racking up massive loan shark debts to pay off his debts. I drained all my savings and piled up loans from everywhere. I thought my sacrifice would make him turn his life around, but instead, it only brought more demands and resentment from him after I refused to pay off his latest gambling debt. My mother pointed at my face and screamed, "This is all your fault. If you hadn't stopped me back then, one good hit with my hammer would have fixed him for good. How could he have ended up like this? You just can't stand to see your brother doing well. You're deliberately trying to ruin our family." My brother glared at me with pure hatred and threw the loan shark's collection notice in my face. "You did this to me. You ruined my life. You should pay for this with your life." He burst into my room with a fruit knife and stabbed me to death. When I opened my eyes again, my mother was holding that claw hammer, aiming it at the baby in the swaddling clothes. The baby's piercing cries slowly brought me back to my senses. Before my eyes, my mother, Lily, with a fanatical look on her face, was holding high the claw hammer, meant for driving nails, pointing it directly at her own 3-day-old son. The cold metal reflected her contorted face. "Hope, Hope, are you deaf? Stop your mother." No. My dad Arthur was beside us, sweating bullets, too scared to step in himself. He kept his voice low and shoved my arm repeatedly. "You're educated. Use your words. Tell your mother this could get someone killed. Hurry." He always hides behind me, using me as his human shield. In my past life, I listened to him, sobbing and clinging to my mother's leg, begging her not to go through with it. In the end, my mother took out all her anger on me, and I ended up bearing the full weight of my brother's tragic life. This time, I refused to play the fool's hero again. Under my father's anxious gaze, I didn't step forward, but instead calmly retreated to the side, completely clearing the space between him and my mother. Then I offered my mother, her face twisted with fury, a faint, understanding smile. "Dad, don't worry. Mom is his birth mother. Why would she harm him? She must have his best interest at heart. I trust her." My father stared at me in disbelief upon hearing my words. The last trace of hesitation vanished from my mother's eyes, replaced by the sheer delight of finding a kindred spirit. "See, I told you my daughter gets it." She shot my father a triumphant glance. "Arthur, what would you know with your narrow perspective? I'm doing this for his own good. As the old saying goes, rebellious bones in the ears mark a born traitor. A child like this can never be tamed. They have no loyalty to their own parents. One day they'd even raise a hand against us for some outsider. This hammer of mine today is going to smash his rebellious roots and shatter his wild nature." Only then will he learn to obey, stand with us as one, achieve great things, and earn big money to support us. In our old age, my father turned pale, with terror at her words. Seeing he couldn't reason with my mother, he started frantically signaling me with his eyes, hissing under his breath. Hope, listen to this. Your mother's lost her mind. Say something quick. Tell her we should wait a couple days. Consult someone who knows about these things. Hurry, buy us some time. I cut his signal and pretended to be torn, stepping forward to tug at my mother's sleeve with a placating tone. Mom, Dad's just worried about little brother. How about we just smash one side today too? Test the waters? If it works, we can do the other side in a couple days. Before I could finish, my mother sharply shook off my hand and snapped. Test what? Waters. In 2 days, the opportunity will be gone. Changing fate requires decisive action in one complete transformation. If you keep dragging your feet and giving up halfway, you'll never amount to anything. We must eradicate the root of misfortune in one go. Our hesitation seemed to infuriate her completely. She shoved me aside with brute force. Here we go again. Get out of my way, all of you. Don't you dare ruin my son's future, just like in my past life. Without another moment's hesitation, she swung her arm in a wide arc, bringing the claw hammer down with a whoosh toward the left ear of the infant swaddled in blankets. A dull thud echoed. The baby's wail instantly intensified. My dad let out a sharp cry and collapsed to the ground in terror. But that wasn't the end of it. My mother, unsatisfied with just one strike, actually raised the hammer and delivered another blow. Good things come in pairs. If you're going to do it thoroughly. Another dull thud followed. The baby's face had turned purple from crying. My mother steeled herself and struck the right ear of this time. The baby's piercing cries abruptly ceased. The world seemed to fall silent, broken only by the faint twitching of his limbs and the gurgle of blood welling behind his ear. I watched calmly, my heart utterly unmoved. You're insane. You mad woman. You've killed your own son. My father finally snapped out of his daze, scrambling frantically on all fours to reach the child. But my mother was faster than him. There wasn't a trace of fear on her face. Instead, it bore the satisfied look of someone who had just accomplished something major. She stopped my father in his tracks, glanced at the bloody mess behind the baby's ear, and said dismissively, "What's all the fuss about? Kids' bones are flexible. It's not like this will kill them." With that, she spun around and rushed to the stove, grabbing a handful of dark incense ash from the burner and pressing it directly onto my brother's wound. The blood mixed with the ash, forming a disgusting blackish-red paste. As she applied pressure, she muttered incantations under her breath. "Don't panic. Incense as stops bleeding and calls upon the gods' protection. It works better than hospital medicine." My father lay collapsed on the ground, his lips trembling uncontrollably, unable to utter a single word. He watched helplessly as my mother smeared that dark red, filthy incense ash over our baby's mangled ears. The bleeding stopped temporarily, but the infant's face had turned a ghastly purplish blue from the high fever and lack of oxygen. He lay there like a fish tossed ashore, barely twitching, completely silent. My mother was breathing heavily, completely exhausted, with sweat beading on her forehead, yet her eyes shone with the serene glow of someone who had accomplished a sacred mission. My father's desperate gaze fell upon me, his last hope, praying that I, his educated daughter, would step forward and speak the truth. I cut his silent plead slowly. I walked over to stand before my mother, under her watchful gaze. I picked up the enamel mug from the table, filled it to the brim with water, and handed it to her with both hands. Mom, you've worked so hard, I said softly with just the right blend of concern and admiration in my voice. Have some water and rest a bit. With you personally changing his fate, little brother is sure to have great blessings in the future. Hearing this, the last glimmer of hope in my father's eyes faded into complete desolation. He realized his only ally had turned against him. My mother was taken back for a moment, then raised an eyebrow, her eyes brimming with delight. She took the glass, gulped down most of the water in a few swift draughts, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and looked triumphantly at her husband, lying collapsed on the floor. Did you hear that? Even hope is more sensible than you, a grown man like you, utterly useless, just sitting here whining. After her outburst, she gently patted my head with affection. My hope is still the best, knowing how much your mother has worried herself sick over you two siblings. I obediently lower my head, concealing the coldness in my eyes. For the next few hours, my mother was completely absorbed in the joy of having successfully changed her fate, turning a deaf ear to my father's repeated urgings to go to the hospital. It wasn't until nightfall that my brother's condition took a sharp turn for the worse. He developed a persistent high fever, his entire body burning up like a furnace. The previously mild twitching escalated into increasingly frequent convulsions. His limbs stiffened and he began foaming at the mouth. Oh no, he's having a seizure. Lily, we have to get to the hospital now. Too. My dad finally snapped into action. Bang. My mom was startled too, but she quickly composed herself. She rushed over and pinned down my brother's convulsing body, her eyes blazing with even greater intensity. She screamed at my father. This isn't a seizure. It's a divine possession. The gods are restructuring his very bones. This is a blessing. If you dare interfere now, you'll disrupt their sacred work and bring heaven's wrath upon us. While shouting, she snatched the heaviest quilt nearby and without hesitation draped it over my brother, swaddling him completely. Just sweat it out. When the gods work, sweating drives all the impurities from the body beneath the quilt. My brother's convulsions grew fainter and fainter. My father completely broke down. He dropped to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably while slapping his own face. Meanwhile, my mother knelt by the quilt, hands clasped in prayer, murmuring incantations as she awaited a miracle. Beneath the heavy quilt, my brother's convulsions gradually subsided. My father scrambled over on all fours and yanked the quilt away in one frantic motion. Under the blanket, the baby lay, with eyes tightly shut, lips tinged purple, its little face swollen like an eggplant, and no movement in its chest. He's not breathing. Bang! My dad let out a sharp cry, whipping his head around, his bloodshot eyes fixed fiercely on my mom, who was still muttering under her breath. You vicious woman, I'll kill you, he roared, charging at my mother for the first time and shoving her away with all his might. Caught off guard, my mother fell backward and slammed into the corner of the table, crying out in pain. Ignoring her, My father trembled as he picked up the feverish, lifeless little body and dashed frantically toward the door. Hope! Quick! Save your brother! He shouted at me in despair. Without hesitation, I grabbed my coat from the chair back and calmly followed. There were no taxis on the village road late. At night, my father, clutching the child, ran for dear life. I followed behind, using my phone to call a car and have it wait at the village entrance. All along the way, my mother's curses echoed from behind in the distance. Arthur, you damned bastard who'll die without an heir. How dare you take my son away? I curse you to be hit by a car. When you step out, I curse you to spend the rest of your life begging in poverty. Give my good fortune back to me. The voice was filled with venom and resentment. My father shuddered, but didn't break stride, carrying my brother directly into the taxi waiting at the village entrance, the emergency room at the city hospital. The doctor on duty took one look at my brother's condition, and his face instantly changed. Quick, to the resuscitation room. Prepare for intubation. Get the ventilator ready. The doctor fired off instructions while angrily confronting my father. How did this child get injured on the head? What's this black substance? What kind of parents are you? My father stood, frozen in terror, trembling too much to form a single word. I calmly stepped forward and answered for him. Doctor. His mother hit him with a hammer and then put an ash on the wound. Every doctor and nurse in the emergency room stopped what they were doing and stared at us as if we were monsters. The attending physician was so furious his face turned ashen and he pointed at my father's nose, yelling, "This is outrageous. This is intentional harm. Just wait. I'm calling the police right now. Please don't call the police." My father's legs gave way beneath him, nearly buckling as he pleaded with a choked soba. After a series of frantic examinations and emergency procedures, my brother finally regained faint signs of heartbeat and breathing and was rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit. The attending physician slammed a critical condition notice onto the table in front of my father. The patient has a skull fracture with a contaminated wound that led to a severe infection. Bacteria have entered the brain, causing acute purulent meningitis. The child is in critical condition and could die at any moment. Even if we save them, there's a high probability of permanent brain damage. Potential outcomes include intellectual disability, paralysis, deafness, or blindness. You need to prepare yourselves for this. My father read the diagnosis on the critical condition notice and staggered. The doctor ignored him and handed over another form. Here's the cost estimate. You'll need to pay a 50.000 yuan deposit first, and the final bill will definitely be higher. 50.000. That number was the final straw that completely broke my father. He didn't take the form. Instead, he walked dejectedly to the end of the corridor, pulled out his phone, and called my mother. The moment the call connected, all the fear, rage, and despair he had bottled up erupted into a hysterical roar. "Lily, you maniac! You've killed someone," the doctor said. "They're calling the police on you. Our son is dying. Even if he survives, he'll be brain damaged. It'll cost hundreds of thousands. You've destroyed this family. Are you happy now?" His voice cracked with anguish as he screamed. Then he slumped against the wall and slowly slid down. The nurse urged from the side, "Family member, please go pay the fee. Quickly, We need to start the medication. My father turned a deaf ear, just staring with vacant eyes while, breathing heavily, I calmly walked past him, took the payment slip from the nurse, and asked softly, "Excuse me, nurse, could you tell me where the billing office is?" At that moment, my father's eyes rolled back and he fell straight backward. "Doctor, doctor, someone's fainted over here." The nurse's panicked cry echoed through the empty hallway. The whole world was in chaos, yet there I stood, perfectly still at the eye of the storm, clutching the payment slip that held my brother's life and our family's future in its hands. The doctors and nurses frantically lifted my father onto the gurney. He just had a severe shock and an acute stress reaction, but he would be fine after. Watching him being wheeled into the observation room, I took out my phone and dialed home. It rang for a long time before someone finally picked up. My mother's impatient voice came through the phone. "ARR, how dare you call me? You've ruined my son. I'm telling you, this isn't over." I explained, "Mom, Dad passed out and my brother is in the ICU, fighting for his life. The doctors need a 50,000 yuan deposit right away. Bring all the money from home and come to the city hospital." With that, Ihun Upe. Before she could respond, about an hour later, my mother finally arrived, looking disheveled from the rush. The moment she saw me, she launched into a barrage of accusations. "Where's that useless father of yours? How much is this going to cost? And listen here, Hope, if you're conspiring with the doctors to swindle me out of money, I'll skin you alive." I replied calmly, "We haven't paid yet." Before my father passed out, he told me to wait for you to make the decision. She raised her eyebrows and stared at me with suspicion. "Stop playing dumb with me. What kind of decision could that good for nothing father of yours possibly make? It's you. You're jealous of your brother. You can't stand the thought of him making something of himself and being the one to support me in my old age. That's why you talked your father into bringing him to the hospital, just to drain my hard-earned life savings and make a laughingstock of our family. I told you my method could save him, but you just had to come along and ruin everything. You jinx." I didn't argue with her, just handed her the critical condition notice I just received from the doctor, still bearing my father's fingerprint. She snatched it from me, her clouded eyes fixed intently on the words "critical condition," her arrogant expression freezing for a split second. But just a second later, she let out a scornful laugh, as if she'd seen through some grand deception. "Critically ill. Don't you dare try to scare me with that. Hospitals always pull the stunt. The worse they make it sound, the more money they squeeze out of you. What meningitis? It's just a regular fever. They're just trying to con us out of 50 grand. As she spoke, she contemptuously tore the paper that held her son's fade into shreds. "We're done with treatment. We're going home. I told you my method would fix him, but you just wouldn't listen. Where's your brother? Get him. We're leaving." As she spoke, she grabbed my arm and tried to drag me out of the hospital. Patients, families, and nurses around us cast strange glances our way, pointing and whispering. I let her pull me along, stumbling after her to the payment window. Just as she was about to tell the staff we're stopping treatment, I suddenly came to a halt. She gave a sharp tug, but it didn't budge. Turning back, she shot me a venomous glare. "What are you trying to pull now?" A stinging slap landed on my cheek, burning with pain. "Listen to me. Hope, if you dare, hand over a single cent today, I'll beat you to death, she threatened. I didn't cry or cover my face. Right there, in the bustling hospital lobby, under the sympathetic gazes of strangers, I spoke each word with deliberate clarity. Mom, I'm not leaving. After saying this, I slowly pulled out 2 items from my worn cloth backpack. The first thing I retrieved was my bank passbook, containing all the scholarship money and allowance I'd saved since junior high, 13,000 yuan in total. The second item was a college acceptance letter freshly delivered to our home, its golden letters still gleaming with promise. I pushed both items toward my mother in front of everyone. Mom, please don't be angry and don't worry about the money. What the hell do you know? My voice was quiet yet thick with emotion and resolve, enough to move everyone present. I'm done with school. I'll go find work at a factory tomorrow. I'm young and strong. I can earn enough for my brother's medical bills. He's my only brother. I won't just stand by and watch him die. Before I could finish speaking, gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. My goodness, this girl is so remarkably mature. How could a mother act this way when she has such a wonderful daughter? She dropped out of college to save her brother. What a devoted sister. These voices pierced my mother like invisible needles, making her once arrogant face flush with alternating shades of red and pale. She was being burned at the stake of public judgment, her eyes greedily fixed on the passbook, then darted wearily toward me, leaving her torn between conflicting impulses, seeing right through her hesitation. I pulled out the paper and pen-eyed, prepared from my backpack, scribbled a few lines, and handed it to her. Mom, I know you're worried about me throwing my future away. How about this? Just sign the statement. It says, I hope, voluntarily quit school and will use all my savings for my brother's treatment. I looked up and said to her in a tone, blending innocence with consideration. 3. Once you sign this, when relatives ask, you can tell them I was dead set on saving our brother and you couldn't stop me no matter what. That way, no one can point fingers at you. My mother's face was unreadable under the stark white lights of the hospital lobby. The murmurs around us grew louder and louder. She was breathing heavily, her eyes locked on the papers, and pen in my hand. In the end, greed and vanity got the better of her. "You said it yourself." She snatched the pen from my hand and scrolled her name crookedly on the thin piece of paper. Lily. The moment I signed, she snatched my bank book and admission letter without ceremony, clearly worried I might change my mind. I'll hold on to these for you. Don't want you splurging recklessly. With that, she marched straight to the payment counter and slapped the bank book down. Arg, there's 13,000 here. Let's get this paid first. It never even crossed her mind whether the money would be enough. I didn't care. I just carefully folded the signed statement in half, then in half again, and tapped it into my innermost pocket. This was my contract of indenture and also my ticket to freedom. With that money, my brother Cashin's emergency treatment went smoothly. A few days later, he was transferred out of the ICU and moved back to a regular hospital room my father was discharged to, but he looked like he'd aged 10 years and spent his days in total silence. The family kept a grim, silent vigil by the bedside until the attending physician walked in with the final test results. The child's life is out of danger, but the side effects we discussed earlier have, unfortunately, materialized. He paused briefly before, continuing, the bacterial infection has severely damaged his auditory nerve. He's lost all hearing in his right ear. My mother staggered as if struck. Additionally, there's irreversible damage to the facial nerve. Look here. The doctor pointed at my brother's face. The left corner of his mouth is slightly drooping, and his left I can't fully close. These are symptoms of facial paralysis, and they'll become more pronounced over time. To put it bluntly, the kid's face is crooked. Hearing loss. His face is crooked. Those words struck my parents' hearts like a sledgehammer. My mother frantically rushed to the hospital bed, turning my brother's face from side to side as she examined it on the infant's face. The left corner of the mouth indeed drooped lower than the right, forming a strange, twisted curve. She leaned close to my brother's right ear again, clapping and shouting, but the child showed no reaction. Still, sleeping soundly, the son she had dreamed would bring honor to the family and ensure her a comfortable life in her later years had completely turned into an unsightly defective product. How could this happen? How could this happen? She collapsed to the ground in despair, muttering the words over and over again. I spent all my money, and this is what I get in return. There wasn't a trace of motherly concern in her voice, only bitter resentment and frustration. My father crouched in the corner, hands gripping his hair on the verge of breaking down, and seeing the expressions on their faces, I knew the moment had come. I quietly packed my small cloth bag, walked over to them, and said in a matter-of-fact tone, Dad, Mom, my brother's ongoing treatment is going to cost a lot more. I am heading south today to find work in a factory, and I'll send money home every month. Lost in their grief, they just waved me away numbly, as if shooing a fly. Go ahead, just go. I turned and walked out of the suffocating hospital room without a trace of nostalgia, leaving the hospital behind. The sunlight outside the hospital was a bit harsh on the eyes. Instead of heading to the long-distance bus station, I went straight to the train station's ticket. Hull. Half an hour later, I was on a train bound for the provincial capital, watching the cityscape rapidly recede outside the window from my inner pocket. I carefully pulled out 2 items. One was the college acceptance letter I had thrown in the trash, but secretly retrieved. The other was my Freedom Declaration, signed with the name Lily. Leaning back in the chair, I gazed at the vast world outside the window and let out a long, heavy sigh. The hope that was meant to hope has been reborn. From this day forward, a month later, my brother Cashin was discharged from the hospital. My parents exhausted all their savings and borrowed heavily from relatives, barely managing to pull him back from the brink of death. But this home was no longer the home it once was. The once promising golden child who carried the family's hopes has now become a fragile soul requiring constant care and medication. The asymmetry in his face grew more pronounced, making nursing a struggle. He'd often choke until his face flushed crimson. Deaf in his right ear, he spent most of his time in his own world, completely unresponsive to outside sounds. Only when discomfort struck would he let out sharp, monotonous cries. Ceaseless day and night, grating on everyone's nerves. Hope turned into disappointment, and anticipation became a burden. The atmosphere at home shifted from lifeless to a powder keg waiting to explode. The first conflict erupted when we scraped The bottom of my brother's formula can. We're broke. My mom slammed the empty formula can on the table. Arthur, aren't you so capable? Go on. Magically. Produced some formula for your son. My dad crouched in the corner, silently, smoking a cigarette. What capability do I have? Who is the one who smashed him? Like this, with a single hammer blowback. Then, how dare you say that? My mom exploded with anger. If it weren't for you insisting on going to the hospital and wasting all that money, would our family be in this state? If you had listened to me and just stayed home to sweat it out, you'd probably be fine by now. My dad slammed the cigarette butt hard onto the ground. Listen to you. If I'd listened to you, weeds would be sprouting from my grave by now. You, brainless viper, you've destroyed our son. You've destroyed this family. I destroyed the family. Arthur, you, spineless coward. If that little hope hadn't gotten in my way, my first swing would have landed true. It's you and your daughter working together to ruin my son. Once the war began, there was no stopping it. They fought over medical bills, over the baby's cries, over every single meal. Everything breakable in the house had been shattered, and the neighbors' gazes toward our home were filled with both scorn and pity. Meanwhile, I was in a university town 1,000 miles away, savoring the most profound peace I'd ever known in both this life and the last. But my parents, all those miles away, had no intention of letting me keep that peace during my very first week on campus. My mother's call came. Through the moment she picked up, she didn't bother with pleasantries, just launched straight into a demanding tone. Hope, aren't you working now? Where's this month's money? Send it back immediately. Your brother can't miss his medication. I was sitting in the sunlit library, where golden rays danced across the pages of my book, calmly turning a page. I replied in an even tone, Mom, have you forgotten you signed that document at the hospital? It was clearly stated in the declaration that we're financially settled. I used all my money to pay the deposit. My obligation is fulfilled. There was a solid 3 seconds of silence on the other end of the line, followed by an explosive torrent of curses. You little bastard. You set me up. All these years I've raised you for nothing. I hope you die a horrible death. I didn't wait for her to finish. I hung up directly and blocked the number starting from the second month. I would send a letter home, punctually, every month each time, seeing my familiar handwriting on the envelope. They would feel a flicker of hope, thinking I had finally come to my senses and sent money back. But when they eagerly tore open the envelope, there was always just a small, pristine slip of paper inside. On it, written in elegant script, was the same message. Mom, Dad, I'm doing well out here. Don't worry about me. For hope kept being rekindled, only to be crushed to ashes time and again. This psychological torment drove them mad far more than poverty ever could. 2 years slipped by amidst the endless arguments and resentment. Cashin was already a toddler taking his first steps. He was thinner and smaller than other kids his age, and his facial asymmetry gave him a perpetually mournful look that made him rather unlikable that day. He cried nonstop, again because he wasn't feeling well. His constant wailing frayed my mother's nerves until she couldn't even focus on her housework. Years of pent-up resentment finally erupted at that moment. She stormed over, shoved Cash into the ground, pointed her finger in his face, and hurled the most vicious curses at him. Stop that crying. All you ever do is cry. You little curse. I must have been blind. Why didn't I just end you with one blowback then? The little child was so terrified that the crying stopped and their whole body trembled. He sat on the cold ground, his eyes wide, with fear and confusion, staring at the ferocious-looking woman before him. He couldn't make out what she was saying, yet he could clearly see the undisguised, bone-deep loathing and hatred over the past decade. I managed to complete my university education by relying on student loans and part-time jobs. After graduation, I stayed in this bustling provincial capital, landed a decent job, and found myself a small but cozy rental apartment to call my own. I completely erased all traces of my past and, like an orphan, began building a brand new life for myself back home. Under my meticulous nurturing, had completely transformed into a prison of resentment. Cashin grew up in this cage until he was 10 years old due to muscle atrophy in his cheeks. His facial features were distorted and crooked. Mouth became an unshakable nickname from his very first day of kindergarten with deafness in his right ear. He could never clearly hear the teacher in class. His grades were a complete mess, making him the most frustratingly slow student. In the teacher's eyes, poverty meant he was always dressed in ill-fitting, worn-out clothes, carrying the musty smell of mildew that never seemed to wash out at school. He was the target of every child's bullying and ridiculed. At home, he became the dumping ground for his parents' frustrations and their failed lives. Worthless. Why don't you just dash? If it weren't for you, would our family have ended up like this? What sin did I commit in my past life to deserve a debt-collecting demon like you? These were the words he had heard most often throughout his 10 years of life. He was like a plant that had grown in a sewer, twisted, venomous, and covered in the poisonous thorns of inferiority and resentment. But the ones he truly resented weren't his parents, who had brought all this upon him, because my parents had long since found him a perfect scapegoat, a convenient target for him to unleash all his malice. Don't blame us, son. If you need someone to hate, blame that wicked, rotten-hearted sister of yours. One evening, after Cashin had been beaten black and blue by his classmates again, my mother held him close and began recounting that story she'd twisted beyond recognition, her voice softer and more gentle than ever before. Your mother was trying to change your fate for the better, but your sister ruined it. She was jealous of you and secretly chanted a curse, making my hand slip and miss the mark. My father chimed in, adding fuel to the fire. Exactly. Your sister was absolutely thrilled to see you get hurt. She pretended to offer tuition money, tricked us into signing, then took off with all the family's savings. That was your medical fund. She wanted you to end up exactly like this. She just can't stand seeing you succeed, or our family doing well. A lie repeated 1,000 times becomes the only truth. Cash and harbored a deep-seated hatred for the sister he had never met, yet who had ruined his life. Night after night, he would carve my name into the wall with a knife, fantasizing about making me suffer 1,000 cuts. Finally, at the age of 16, he was expelled from school for hitting a bully in the head with a stone. My parents dragged him home, berating and hitting him the entire way. Once home, my mother pointed her finger in his face and launched into that same old tirade she'd repeated countless times. You useless waste, just like you're of a sister. Both of you are nothing but burdens. Don't you dare Insult me. Cashin suddenly lashed out, like an enraged cub, his eyes blazing, red as he snarled at my mother. I'm not a failure. It's all Hope's fault. She ruined me. He had finally internalized his parents' decadal long brainwashing, turning it into his own unshakable conviction. Give me her address. I'm going to find her. I'll kill her. He shrieked hysterically. My parents looked at his contorted face, and instead of being frightened, they exchanged a triumphant glance. They had been waiting for this day for far too long. That night, I had just finished a lengthy overtime meeting and dragged my exhausted body back home. My phone chimed with a ding. It was a text message from an unknown number. I thought it was spam, so I casually opened it. On the screen, there were only a few short words. Hope, why aren't you dead yet? Staring at the message on my phone screen, I fell silent for a long time. I didn't reply, nor did I feel afraid. My family finally unleashed the vicious dog they'd been feeding with resentment for 16 years, setting it loose to attack me. I calmly deleted the text message and proceeded to do 3 things in sequence. First, I sent a concise email to my direct supervisor explaining that due to some complicated, unresolved family matters, I might face harassment in the near future and hoped the company would be prepared. Second, I deposited the signed original declaration along with a copy of the hospital's diagnostic report into a bank safety deposit box, keeping only a notarized copy with me. Third, I ordered a compact, high-decibel personal alarm online. After completing these preparations, I carried on with my daily routine, eating and sleeping as usual. 3 days later, he showed up that afternoon. As I was preparing meeting materials, the receptionist called on the internal line, her voice trembling with nervousness. Hope, there are people downstairs claiming to be your family. They're making a scene in the lobby, demanding to see you, and security can't hold them back. Understood. I'll be right down. I calmly hung up the phone. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, a crowd of colleagues had already gathered, drawn by the commotion, and there, at the center of it all, stood my family, the family I hadn't seen in 16 years. My mother stood with her hands on her hips, screaming her head off at the receptionist. My father just stood off to the side, sighing heavily and playing his usual role of the long-suffering meat man. Behind them stood a gaunt teenager with a sinister glare in his eyes. He was dressed in ill-fitting, cheap sports, his hair unkempt, with the left corner of his mouth perpetually downturned in a sneer that made his whole face radiate menace. This was caution. I made my way through the crowd and came to a halt before them. Hope, you heartless creature, how dare you show your face? My mother immediately redirected all her fury toward me the moment she saw me. Your brother borrowed 50,000 to search for you. The debt collectors are after him now. You're paying back every cent. My father chimed in immediately, his voice heavy with anguish. Hope, your brother has had such a hard life all these years. It's all because of what you did back then. You have to take responsibility. Bring him to live with you. Find him a job, and you'll need to support him from now on. Slap. One wants money. The other wants me to take him in and be saddled with him for life. They're working together seamlessly. My colleagues around me are whispering among themselves, and the looks they give me have grown complicated. I ignored the murmurs and simply looked at them, asking calmly, before they could respond, I retrieved a laminated A4 sheet from my briefcase, the very copy of that declaration. MS. Lily, Mr. Arthur, 16 years ago, you personally signed this document with your own hands. I held up the document for them to see and for all the onlookers as well. It's in black and white, legally binding. This document clearly states that all financial matters between us are settled with no further obligations. So, I won't be giving you a single cent. My mother's face turned beet red. She tried to snatch it from me, but the security guard stopped her. I turned to my father and caught a flicker of panic cross his face. I took out my phone, opened an audio file, and turned the volume all the way up. 5. By the way, Dad, you seem to have forgotten why my brother ended up like this. Don't worry, I remember it for you. The next second, my father's hysterical screaming from 16 years ago echoed clearly through the opulent company lobby. Lily, you lunatic, you killed someone. The doctors said they're calling the police on you. You've destroyed this family. Are you happy now? The voice in the recording was filled with fear and venom, and my father's face instantly turned deathly pale. My mother froze for a split second, then immediately turned the tables, pointing at my father and shrieking, "That's a vicious lie. You're just shouting nonsense to shift the blame. When did I ever say I wouldn't save our son?" I watched her calmly, then tapped my phone screen lightly to play the second recording. It was from 16 years ago. Those shrill, cutting words she'd spat out in the hospital corridor when faced with the critical condition. Notice, critically ill. Don't you dare try to scare me with that. Hospitals always pull the stunt. The worse they make it sound, the more money they squeeze out of you. What? Meningitis. It's just a regular fever. They're just trying to con us out of 50 grand. As soon as the recording played, my coworkers gasped in shock, and everyone stared at my mom like she was a lunatic. My mom's face turned beet red, her lips trembling as she tried to defend herself. I was just angry. I never said I wouldn't get him treated. So, you're saying we refused treatment? A cold smirk touched my lips as I played the final recording. We're done with treatment. We're going home. My method would have fixed your brother completely, but you wouldn't listen. Where is he? Carry him home now. The 3 recordings played consecutively, each landing like a stinging slap that ripped away my parents' facade of being pitiful victims. The hall fell deathly, silent in an instant. My father slumped against the wall like a dog with its tendons ripped out under the crowd's scornful gaze. My mother's face flushed from red to purple, then sickly green. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Their supposedly unbreakable victim alliance was shattered to pieces by their own words, delivered through me. Security. I put away my phone and said to the 2 security guards who had been waiting nearby, "These 3 are my family members, but their current behavior is seriously disrupting my work. Please escort them out." The security guards immediately stepped forward, each taking one of my stunned parents by the arm. They were half dragged, half shoved at the door, still spewing furious curses, and Cashin, the Avenger sent as a weapon, stood frozen in place the entire time as he stared at the statement and phone in my hand. His eyes, once filled with nothing but hatred, for the first time showed confusion and doubt when security tossed them out like trash onto the roadside outside the company building. The tension that had held my parents together for 16 years finally snapped. Arthur, you goddamn monster. My mother lunged at him like a madwoman, clawing and scratching. You spineless coward. This is all your fault. If you hadn't teamed up with that to snatch our child back then, none of this would have happened.